Sometimes in love, it ain't about what's being said. It's about what's not being said. You can learn more from silence than from 1,000 words. Because see, love is not just about the big gestures, the poems, or the good morning texts. It's about how a person shows up when no words are spoken. When someone truly loves you, silence can feel safe. You don't have to constantly talk, explain, or prove anything. You can sit in the same room, not say a word, and still feel connected. That's love. People can talk all day long. They can sweet talk you. They can tell you everything you want to hear, but that don't always mean it's the truth. Words are easy. Anybody can say, I love you. Anybody can promise, I'll never leave. Anybody can talk about forever. But silence, now that's different. Silence don't play around. Silence don't sugarcoat nothing. Silence is like a mirror. It shows you what's real without the decoration. That's why you got to learn to pay attention to it. See, in a relationship, silence can tell you things words are trying to cover up. A man can tell you, baby, you're my everything. But if his silence is filled with absence, if he ain't calling, if he ain't showing up, if he ain't checking on you, then that silence is speaking the truth. He may never admit it, but his silence already gave him away. It's like this. When someone is truly invested in you, their silence won't leave you confused. Even when they're quiet, you'll feel their presence, because love is not just about what's being said. It's about what's being done. Think about it. You can sit in the same room with somebody who really loves you, and y'all don't say a word, but you feel at peace. There's no awkwardness, no emptiness, just a calmness, because their energy speaks louder than words. That silence is full of comfort. But you can also sit in silence with somebody who's pulling away, and suddenly that quiet feels heavy. It feels cold. It feels like a warning. The same silence that feels beautiful with the right person will feel unbearable with the wrong one. That's how you know truth is hiding in silence. A lot of women ask me, Steve, how do I know if he's serious about me? And I tell them, listen to the silence. Not just the words, not just the promises, but the space in between. Because a man who wants you will fill that silence with his actions. He may not always have the right words. He may not be Shakespeare, but his silence won't feel like abandonment. You won't have to sit there wondering if he's thinking about you. His silence will reassure you, because you already know by the way he treats you when he does speak, when he does act, when he does show up. On the other hand, silence can be the biggest red flag when it comes with distance. When he's suddenly quiet but not in a peaceful way, when he stops including you, when he stops communicating, when he starts giving you space you didn't ask for, that silence is him telling you something words will never admit. That silence is saying, I'm not in this the way I used to be. And too many people ignore that. They think if he's not saying it, maybe it ain't true. But no silence is truth. If you pay attention, it'll show you everything you need to know. See, when it's real, silence is safe. When it's not, silence is a signal. Don't get caught up in the words somebody tells you just to keep you calm. Look at the silence. That's where the truth lies. Words can lie, silence cannot. And once you start listening to silence, you'll never be fooled again, because you'll understand that the loudest truth in love is often spoken without a single word. There's a big difference between the kind of silence that brings peace and the kind of silence that creates distance. You can feel it, you can sense it, and your heart knows the difference, even if your mind tries to ignore it. When two people truly love each other, silence doesn't feel like something's missing. It feels like something's present. You can sit in the same room, not say a word, and still feel a connection. That's what I call peaceful silence. It's when love is so strong that it don't need constant words to prove itself. Think about when you're with somebody you really care about. Y'all could be riding in the car, music low, no conversation happening, and still you feel comfortable. You don't need to fill the space with chatter because the connection is already there. Peaceful silence feels like home. It tells you, I'm safe here, I'm valued here, I belong here. That's how love works when it's real. It don't have to always shout. Sometimes it just whispers through quiet moments. But then there's the other kind of silence, the silence that don't feel right. The silence that leaves you wondering, what happened? Why does it feel like I'm alone even when I'm sitting right next to them? That's empty silence. That's the type of silence that creates distance, and deep down, you already know what it means. Empty silence feels like rejection without the words. It feels like a wall between you and the person you're supposed to be closest to. It don't give you peace. It gives you anxiety. You find yourself questioning, is he pulling away? Is she not feeling me anymore? Did the love change? See, peaceful silence strengthens love, but empty silence weakens it. The two may look the same from the outside, but the feeling inside is completely different. One makes you feel closer. The other makes you feel farther apart. And here's the truth. When you love somebody, you shouldn't have to live in that empty silence all the time. Because a partner who truly cares will find a way to close that gap. They won't leave you sitting in uncertainty. They won't let silence turn into distance. A lot of people ignore empty silence because they're holding on to the words that were said in the past. They remember when he said, I'll always be here. Or when she said, you're my world. But those words don't match the silence that's happening now. And if the silence feels empty, that's the truth talking. People can change their words. They can dress them up, but silence always tells on them. If love is slipping away, silence will show it before words ever admit it. Peaceful silence is what you want in a relationship. It's when you can sit in comfort, when you can breathe easy, when you don't feel pressured to always perform or entertain. That's when you know the bond is deep. But empty silence, if that's all you're getting, it means something's broken. And you got to be honest with yourself about it. Because love is supposed to bring connection, not confusion. If silence makes you feel alone instead of loved, then the distance has already started, whether they say it or not. So the real test in love is not just how somebody talks to you, but how their silence feels. If their quiet moments give you peace, that's love. If their quiet moments leave you doubting, that's distance. Don't confuse the two, because in the end, silence is not empty. It's full of meaning. And that meaning will always tell you whether you're truly connected or slowly drifting apart. A lot of people think love has to be loud all the time. They think it's about constant talking, endless texts, big romantic speeches, or dramatic gestures every single day. But that ain't what real love is. Love don't always need noise. What love really needs is presence. The quiet, steady presence of someone who shows up for you, not just with words, but with their whole being. Because noise fades, words can lose meaning, but presence, that's where the truth is. You ever notice how some people can talk all day about how much they love you, but when you need them the most, they're nowhere to be found? That's noise? That's performance. But somebody who really loves you can sit next to you in silence, not say a word, and you still feel their love. That's presence. It's when their actions, their consistency, their efforts speak louder than any words they could ever say. Love is about being there, not just when it's convenient, not just when everything's going right, but when life gets hard, when the road gets rough, when the smiles aren't easy. You can't always talk your way through those moments, but you can show up. That's what presence looks like. It's being steady enough that your partner never doubts where you stand, even when there aren't any words filling the space. Think about it like this: noise demands attention, but presence gives assurance. You don't have to wonder, do they care? Do they love me? Because you can feel it. They're present in the way they check on you, in the way they notice the little things, in the way they show respect without you having to ask for it. That's real love. It don't have to shout. It don't have to prove itself every second. It just shows up again and again. Presence in love is powerful because it builds trust. And trust is not built by 1,000 I love yous. It's built by consistency. It's built by the fact that when they say they'll be there, they show up. When they promise support, you feel it. When they tell you you're important, their actions confirm it without them even opening their mouth. That's why love that's real doesn't need constant noise. It's strong enough to speak in silence. Now, don't get me wrong, words matter. It's good to hear, I love you. It's good to have conversations. It's good to express yourself. But when words are the only thing holding the relationship together, it won't last. Because the moment the words stop, the love feels empty. That's why presence matters more. It's the foundation. It's what makes the silence between two people feel comfortable instead of cold. Presence is holding somebody's hand when they're nervous. Presence is sitting next to them when they're crying and not knowing what to say, but still staying there. Presence is being the shoulder they can lean on without asking twice. That's love. That's how you know somebody is really invested in you. Not by how loud they can be, but by how steady they can be. So many relationships break because people chase the noise. They get caught up in the excitement, the big words, the flashy gestures. But when the noise dies down, there's nothing left. Real love don't need constant performance. Real love is about knowing that even in the quiet, even in the stillness, even when life ain't glamorous, you are not alone. That's why love don't require constant noise. It just requires presence. And presence, my friend, is the loudest language of all. When a man truly wants you, his silence will never leave you wondering where you stand. You won't be sitting there late at night asking yourself, does he really care about me? Does he see a future with me? Am I wasting my time? Because a man who is serious about you makes his presence known, even in the quiet moments. His silence doesn't come with confusion. It comes with certainty. That's how you know the difference between a man who's playing and a man who's planning. See, confusion is usually a sign that somebody is not giving you the clarity you deserve. If you're always questioning his feelings, if you're always trying to interpret what his silence means, then deep down you already know something ain't right. Because a man who wants you will never let his silence feel like distance. He may not always be talking, he may not always have the perfect words, but you'll never doubt his intentions. That silence will carry peace, not anxiety. I tell women all the time, stop trying to decode a man's silence when the answer is already in how it makes you feel. If his silence makes you restless, if it feels like he's pulling away, if it feels like you're chasing after explanations, then he's not giving you what you need. But when a man wants you, his silence feels different. You feel secure, you feel chosen, you feel like he's with you even when he ain't speaking. That's because his actions have already done the talking. Think about it. A man who wants you is going to show up. He's going to check on you. He's going to care about your well-being. He's going to make sure you never feel like you're guessing. When he's quiet, it won't be because he's avoiding you. It'll be because he's working, resting, or simply sitting in comfort with you. You don't have to second guess it because everything else he does backs up his love. That's why silence in a real relationship doesn't confuse, it confirms. Now, don't mistake this for perfection. A man may not always know how to express his emotions. He may not always be a talker. But if he wants you, you won't feel neglected. You won't feel abandoned. His silence won't feel like punishment. It won't feel like you're being ignored. Instead, it'll feel like trust, like you can breathe easy even when he ain't saying a word because you already know his heart is with you. But when a man doesn't want you, or when he's only halfway invested, that's when silence starts to sting. That's when you're up at night wondering why he hasn't called, why he hasn't texted, why he's suddenly distant. That's when silence becomes a game of guessing and hoping. And let me tell you, real love is never about guessing. Real love is about knowing. So pay attention to how his silence feels. If it's filled with peace, if it leaves you secure, if it never makes you doubt your place in his life, then that man wants you. But if it leaves you uneasy, if it leaves you wondering, if it makes you chase explanations he never gives, then you already have your answer. Because a man who wants you makes sure his silence never confuses you. He'll make sure you feel his love, even in the quiet. One of the clearest signs that something is wrong in a relationship is when you start to feel lonely while sitting in silence with the person you're supposed to be closest to. That's a red flag you can't afford to ignore, because love should never make you feel alone when you're together. Love should never leave you sitting right next to somebody, but feeling like you're miles apart. That kind of loneliness don't just show up out of nowhere. It's silence telling you the truth. Now, let me break this down. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely. You can be alone and feel perfectly fine, perfectly at peace, because you know where you stand. But loneliness in silence is different. It's heavy. It eats at you. It makes you wonder, why do I feel like I don't matter? Why do I feel unseen, unheard, untouched, even though he's right here? That feeling is your heart warning you. It's telling you something in the relationship is broken, and ignoring it only makes it worse. When two people really love each other, silence is never lonely. It's peaceful, it's warm, it feels safe. But when the love starts to fade, silence turns cold. Suddenly, the quiet doesn't feel comfortable anymore. It feels empty. You start reaching for conversations, trying to fill the space, trying to bring back connection, but nothing works. That's because the silence has already revealed the truth. His heart ain't in it the way it used to be, and your spirit feels the distance, even if he won't admit it. I hear women say all the time, Steve, I don't understand why I feel so alone in this relationship. He's here, but it's like he ain't really here. And my answer is simple. Pay attention to that. Don't brush it off. Don't convince yourself it's just a phase. If silence with the person you love makes you feel lonelier than being by yourself, that's a red flag. Because the right love should add to your life, not drain it. See, loneliness in silence usually means the emotional connection is missing. Maybe he's distracted. Maybe he's pulling away. Maybe he's just not invested like you are. But whatever the reason, silence shouldn't leave you feeling invisible. Love is about presence, attention, care, even in the quiet. And when that's gone, you'll feel it in your soul before you see it with your eyes. Here's the thing. Too many people ignore that red flag because they're afraid of what it means. They think if they hold on a little longer, things will change. They think if they talk more, love harder, prove themselves, the silence will feel different. But silence never lies. If it feels like loneliness today, it's showing you a truth that words can't cover up. And pretending not to notice only delays the heartbreak that's already waiting down the road. A man who loves you will never let you sit in silence and feel lonely. Even if he's quiet, even if he's not a big talker, his presence will still give you peace. You'll still feel seen, cared for, and valued. But if the silence feels like rejection, if it feels like neglect, then you already know where you stand. That's not love, that's distance. That's a red flag you should respect, not ignore. So trust that feeling. Loneliness in silence is not something to push aside. It's your heart telling you the truth your mind may not want to face. Real love won't leave you lonely in the quiet. It'll hold you, comfort you, and remind you that you're not alone. But if silence keeps breaking you down, it's time to admit the truth. The red flag has already been raised. Silence, when you really pay attention to it, can be the loudest language of love. People think love is about what's said, about the I love yous, the compliments, the long conversations late at night. And sure, that's part of it. But real love shows up in the spaces where no words are spoken. It shows up in the way someone looks at you when you're not looking, in the way they reach for your hand without asking, in the way they sit next to you and make you feel secure without ever opening their mouth. That's silence talking, and sometimes it's saying more than words ever could. Think about it. Words can be rehearsed. They can be performed. They can even be faked. But silence is pure. Silence is natural. It's in those quiet moments where the truth of love becomes clear. If two people can sit in a room together without saying a word and still feel connected, still feel safe, still feel understood, that's love speaking its loudest. Because you don't need a script when the bond is real. The silence says, I'm here, I got you. I'm not going anywhere. And now on the flip side, silence can also speak truths we don't want to hear. It can say, I'm done. I don't care anymore. My heart isn't in this. And that's why learning to understand silence is so powerful. When you understand it, you stop being fooled by words that don't match actions. You stop clinging to promises that sound good, but don't feel good. You start paying attention to the unspoken, and the unspoken never lies. A man who truly loves you may not always be the most talkative. He might not write poetry. He might not be great with words, but his silence will still carry love. You'll see it in the way he shows up for you. You'll feel it when he's sitting beside you after a long day, not saying much, but giving you comfort just by being there. That's silence speaking, telling you he cares without him ever having to say it. And when you learn to understand that language, you stop needing constant noise to feel secure. The truth is, the deepest moments of love are often the quiet ones. It's not in the loud declarations or the fancy speeches, it's in the stillness. When you're together and nothing has to be said because everything is already known. That's why silence, when you understand it, becomes louder than any words. Because it doesn't just tell you how somebody feels, it shows you. But here's the catch. You got to be honest with yourself about what the silence is saying. If it feels safe, if it feels peaceful, that's love speaking. But if it feels empty, if it feels distant, if it feels like loneliness, then silence is speaking too. It's just telling you something harder to accept. That's why you can't ignore silence. It's always delivering a message, and if you know how to listen, it'll save you from a lot of pain. So don't just focus on what people say. Watch what their silence tells you. Listen to the pauses, to the moments between the words, to the way the quiet feels when you're with them. Because silence understood is louder than I love you. It's louder than promises. It's louder than explanations. Silence, when it's real, says this is love, or it says this is over. And once you learn to hear it, you'll never miss the truth again.